Hello out there in Blogging Head viewers land. This is Glenn Loury of The Glenn Show at bloggingheads.tv, and I am here with Kelly Suzanne Saulsberry, who is resident of Chicago, Illinois, and I'll give her a chance to introduce herself more fully in a moment. I just want to mention to those who might be looking in that here I am talking with Kelly Suzanne, who is not, a person whom I ordinarily would have invited on the Blogging Heads because I don't really know her. But as I say, she'll introduce herself momentarily, is a person who views The Glenn Show at bloggingheads.tv and comments, and is also a Facebook friend of mine. And so we have one of these kind of virtual friendships. Yeah. And I've been toying with the idea of having conversations with people who might not be, editors at the New York Times or the Atlantic Monthly or something like that, or professors at some university, but who are nevertheless interesting people. Here at The Glenn Show, talk about issues of common interest. And so I've invited Kelly and Suzanne onto the show. You want to introduce yourself more formally? I might just point out that you sign your email with something like civil servant, advocate, and writer. And you have a quotation here from Paul Wellstone, former Senator Paul Wellstone. There are three critical ingredients: democratic renewal and progressive change in America, good public policy, grassroots organizing, and electoral politics. Yes. So that gives us some idea where you might be coming from, but why don't you fill in the blanks?
Okay. Well, first of all, Glenn, it's so weird to call you Glenn because I want to call you Dr. Loury.
Well, if you can't help yourself, okay. But Glenn is quite fine. Yeah. Call me Glenn.
Okay, so first of all, I have to say I'm so excited to be on this show because I just love a lot of the conversations that you have, the topics you explore, and I appreciate your candor as well, and that your show is an opportunity to sort of get beyond the talking points and lack of candor and really take a deep dive into issues and have conversations with people who agree with you or don't, who come from different backgrounds, disciplines, and walks of life. So thank you for having me on.
You're welcome.
So excited to be here. Very honored.
So thank you.
Just a little bit about myself. So I am a Chi-Town girl, born and raised on the south side of Chicago like you were. Went to, I have a sister, and who is 7 years older. And our parents are Billy and Dolores. They both came from large families. So it's sort of funny that they only had two kids. My dad was one of 13. My mom was one of 6. And they got together and decided that they would only have 2 children. So grew up on the south side of Chicago to parents who were very active in local politics. And so both of them, I remember when I was a really, really young girl, both of them were volunteers on Harold Washington's mayoral campaign. And they took my sister and me to every kind of, town hall, voter registration drive, all of that kind of stuff. So I say that because I have them to credit for planting the seeds of, an interest in politics and social issues and civic engagement and cultural issues and those kinds of things, along with other members of my family. So I grew up in Chicago, went to St. Ignatius College Prep. For those in the Chi-Town area, you'll know what that is. Went away for college for undergrad to Wellesley in Massachusetts, where I was very involved in different student organizations on campus and that kind of thing. After graduating, I taught English in a high school just outside Paris, which was a fantastic experience. Really
in France.
In France, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a working class high school in a suburb, so a lot of students of Arab descent, a lot of working class whites, people of African descent. It was a really diverse school in a working class suburb in Paris, and got a chance to become proficient in French and also teach English. And it was funny because I wasn't that much older than some of the students I was teaching. It was a fabulous time. Came back to Chicago, and my parents said, yeah, that's great that you did that. Now it's time to apply to grad school. I did not know what I wanted to study, what I wanted to do. I wound up applying to all these different graduate school programs, and got accepted to a program in Middle Eastern history at Tufts University, went for the graduate orientation, and just decided that that wasn't my goal. That wasn't my dream. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I just worked a few odd jobs, and I worked in retail and did that. Anyway, fast forward, I wound up, getting my bearing, and I worked in nonprofit organizations addressing civic engagement, different advocacy issues, community issues, did that. And then in 2011, decided it was time now for me to go to graduate school and pursue my own goals and dreams. So I studied at the University of Chicago Harris School of Public Policy. And then after graduating in 2013, landed in the mayor's office, the Chicago mayor's office. I was in the policy shop there for 2 years.
Mayor Richard Daley?
No, Mayor Emanuel. So,
oh, I see. Yeah. Okay. I got my years wrong. Yeah. Oh, Ram has been there for 8 years. Is that right?
He has. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I worked there.
Okay. So you worked in the mayor's office. Okay. Go ahead.
I did. Yeah. I worked there for 2 years. And then in 2015, I transitioned to my current department, which is the Chicago Commission on Human Relations. So that's just like a very brief, version of sort of how I got to where I am.
Well, okay. I mean, I don't know how brief, but it was certainly interesting.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm kidding. I'm just pulling your leg. Listen, I think a lot of people are going to want to know you're an African-American woman, if I may observe. You're just a little bit younger than me. I'm not going to say it's all that much, but it's a lot. And you probably have your own perspective on things, and yet I know you follow the conversations that I had with John McWhorter here at the Glenn Show about race and culture and politics and everything like that. And so here you are. What do you think about all that? Because it's we're controversial.
You are controversial. And I think that who said controversial is always bad, right? I really like that you talk about, number one, issues of race, issues, things that are happening in Black communities, political issues. And you're not afraid to be honest about your points of view. I don't agree with everything you say. I don't disagree with everything you say, but that's not really why I tune in. I tune in because I have a real interest and passion for a lot of the conversations you dare to have that some people don't want to have because it's almost like a verbal landmine. People are afraid of being called out. People are afraid of having their reputations disparaged. People are afraid of being called Uncle Toms, racist, those kinds of things, to the point where you can't even sometimes have the dialogue. And so I am interested in the issues you talk about, and it's meaningful to me that both of y'all are brothers talking about these issues. So I have enjoyed tuning in. I've learned a lot, and it's been great. Yeah. Now,
as you know, I have conversations here at the Glenn Show on occasion with my son, Alden Keith Loury.
Yeah.
Who is now editor of the Race, Class, and Communities desk at the WBEZ radio station.
Yes, that's fantastic.
The public radio station in Chicago. Yeah, I know. It is fantastic. It is fantastic. We've been talking about Chicago. You're a native from Chicago. Mm-hmm. We've been talking about human rights and inequality related issues, especially about the violence and stuff that's going on. Alden has put out a big report that started at his former job with the Metropolitan Planning Council of Chicago. Of Cook County, I think. In any case, a report on segregation in the city of Chicago, things like that. And among the issues, controversial, quote unquote, issues that McWhorter and I kick around here at this podcast are issues having to do with policing and murder rates and violence and so-called Black on Black crime and Black Lives Matter and things like that. Alden and I have somewhat different orientations toward how to think about those problems. I would say he's to my left. I think that's a safe statement to say.
Yeah.
Since you're privy to these conversations, you're working in the field of human rights, and you're right there in Chicago. You're a native. I'm just wondering how you see these issues and how you react to whatever it is you might have heard being said about them here.
Well, yeah, in a lot of the work that I do, so one of the things that we do on my job is, I don't want to dive too much, into like city politics so much just because I work in it. You know, I feel like I want to be careful, somewhat careful, but I can say that definitely as a citizen and even as a resident of Chicago and even in my work, we work with communities that definitely have some views and opinions on the police, you know, and policing, those kinds of things. And there are real palpable tensions that really shape people's views of police, views of policing. There are folks that I work with in my work, not only for the city, but in my work as a private citizen, where there are folks who think that the police should be abolished, that there should be no police whatsoever, that there should be other ways of addressing grievance or crime. And I work with other groups, for example, who actually do want to engage the police. They don't want the police gone, but they also understand that there is a problem with some policing in terms of, you know, how certain communities are treated, in terms of certain assumptions being made, in terms of bias, in terms of sometimes lack of mental health for police who have been exposed to trauma over and over, in terms of de-escalation and training. But they don't want to have an antagonistic relationship with the police, but they actually want to engage the police in a constructive way, but at the same time are very much troubled by some, you know, of the abuse from some police officers, right? And some of the more systemic and cultural issues, if you will.
My reaction to no police is, oh, come on, that's crazy. Nobody can really believe that. But you're telling me that the enmity is so deep that the injury of mistreatment and suspicion and the contempt that police convey, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but this is the message that I'm getting. The harm that's been done by bad police behavior over the years in these communities has so alienated people that they're prepared to contemplate a world in which there wouldn't be any civilly authorized law enforcement with the authority to, you know, impose itself. And my sense is, you know, this is what I would say if I was writing the op-ed piece. I'd say, come on, you do that and crime's just going to go up, and the people who are going to suffer from that are going to be the people who are living there. They can't really mean that they want to be in a state of nature, because that's what, you know, there's a TV show out there, isn't there, that they do like one night a year or something like that, where there's no law enforcement, then everybody goes crazy. Yeah. I don't mean to make light of something that's really very serious, but the idea that the feelings in the communities about law enforcement could be so raw that this would even be contemplated as a serious proposal surely has to be taken seriously. That's a message I'm taking from what you're saying. As to what's going on. And this idea of mental health, police traumatized by past events, not having adequate treatment, going around with PTSD or whatever they're going around with, and then taking that out on people, not knowing how to deal with conflict situations, getting triggered by this or that, you know, threatening move or disrespectful word from a citizen, and then acting out on that. That certainly is something that's worth considering.
No, absolutely.
But you've heard me here criticize Black Lives Matter. What do you think about that?
You have criticized Black Lives Matter.
I have.
Well, you know, I think that it's you know, first of all, I don't think any group, whether it's a social justice group, whether it's a nonprofit organization, whatever the entity is, I don't think any group is above critique. You know, or above reproach. I think that, you know, all groups are going to have things that make some people connect with them, and some groups are going to have detractors and those kinds of things. So, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with having a critique of Black Lives Matter. I think it is important that Black Lives Matter does address issues of among other things they address, issues of abuse of power and authority by law enforcement and police. I think that's an important issue. Police are there to serve and protect, and so that's an oath that should be taken seriously. And if there are systemic issues or cultural issues in the police department that preclude them from doing that, then I think that's important. At the same time, I think what's also important to address that really hurts me is a lot of the violence taking place in Black neighborhood communities where, yes, Black life is being snuffed out by Black people. And I know the term Black on Black crime is, you know, that really rattles some people. They don't like that They don't like that term. They think that it's used against Black people and used to draw attention away from, bad behavior of some police officers and that kind of thing. But I do think it's an important issue that we as a community address. If most of the crime that's taking place is snuffing out the lives of other Black people, I think it's foolish not to take that seriously and look at what's happening, what's underneath that.
Well, let me try this on you, which is also to reprise a theme that I've pushed here at the podcast in the past, which is, okay, Black Lives Matter. And then if you say all lives matter, everybody gets upset and they want to say, no, we want to put the emphasis on Black. Okay, I understand why they want to put the emphasis.
Yeah.
But, police are mistreating white people too, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then Black on Black crime. Well, see, aren't these two sides, these flip sides of the same coin, so to speak? That is, the white Trump inclined voter who talks about Black on Black crime is viewing things through a racial lens. And the anti-police brutality protester, Black Lives Matter advocate who talks about Black lives, white cop accosting Black citizen when cops accosting citizens, regardless of their race, is a problem, is also trafficking in the currency of racial identification and, in a sense, racial, injury, racial entitlement, and what I'm inclined to say, Pollyanna that I am, is that the race is not really the fundamental issue in many of these instances. I'm not saying it's never the issue. It is the issue.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I don't know that a lot of Black people are in prison. I do know that. I've read books about that.
Right.
I'm not saying that I'm not aware, having grown up on the South Side of Chicago in the 1950s and the 1960s when the police were off the chain.
Yes, I can only imagine.
Try getting stopped on the Dan Ryan Expressway in 1964, driving your car too fast. See what happened to you. Okay. So I know. But still, I want to say, here we are in the year 2019, Kelly Suzanne, 2019, man. Civil rights stuff, Malcolm X, all that's a long, long time ago. Must we remain mired perpetually? And I'll stop. In a racial lens and a racial thing, because the thing has two sides. I'll finish, but I want to call this incident to your attention because I know you know what I'm talking about. A police commander, a Chicago police commander, was murdered at the bottom of a stairwell across the street from City Hall, probably close to where you work.
Right.
By a guy, he happened to be a Black guy who, I don't know, he was fleeing or something. He was armed. He went down the stairwell. The commander went down after him. He got murdered. Now, the guy was Black and the police commander was white. If I were to pick up the newspaper with a headline saying Black criminal murders heroic white cop, I'd be mortified. But it is exactly isomorphic to if the commander had gotten the drop on the criminal and shot him first. Okay. The headline then would have been white cop murders. See, now this is just not healthy. It's not, this is my position. I want to hear how you react to that.
So your question is I want to make sure I'm responding to that.
We wouldn't have to worry about so-called Black on Black crime if we were more oriented toward getting beyond putting things in racial terms altogether.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Which means if there's a quid and there's a pro quo. And the quid is that you give up labeling every incident between a cop and a person who happens to be Black a racial incident. And the quo is that you then have much firmer ground to denounce people who want to talk about the awful violence that goes on in Black communities in terms of something like it's Black pathology, Black on Black crime, something that doesn't have anything to do with them, something that's going on amongst the heathens down there in the ghetto.
Oh, yeah. So my response to that would be, one, no, I'm not convinced that every single encounter, let's say, for example, between a white police officer and a Black person, I don't assume that that everything is racially motivated. Like if something happens, it must be racially motivated. I think it would be a mistake to make that assumption. But I think it's almost impossible in this country, I would say, Glenn, to completely take race off the table altogether when you're talking about policing and the police department, considering the history of policing in this country. I mean, you just mentioned in the 1950s, right? In Chicago, and you could get pulled off the side of the road just for being Black. You didn't have to do anything wrong or anything like that. I mean, it's about race and profiling and those kinds of things. I don't think that issue has gone away. I still think that race is still a part of the equation. I do agree with you that I don't think we should assume that everything is completely racially motivated. It can't be that, perhaps there are white police officers that are also treating white people poorly, right? Or people of other backgrounds. But I don't think that you can take race out of the equation, considering I have to say the role of the police, the really horrific relationship between police and community and the racial backdrop in this country. I don't think you can take race off the table. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm not sure I agree with you. I mean, take it off the table. Of course, I don't propose to never talk about race again.
Yeah.
De-emphasize and not define your social and political goals in racial terms isn't equivalent to taking race off the table. It's a different.
No, that I agree with you. I think broader goals, broader perspectives are very important. For example, I am not just a Black person. I'm also a Chicagoan. I'm also a woman. I'm an American citizen. I'm someone who likes to travel. And so something that does really bother me is how myopic sometimes some of these spaces that I've been in the past can be, where we look at things some people look at things only through a very, very narrow identity, and that has to shape and color everything. I'm not for that. I think that, we are full human beings with various life experiences and things that shape us and that shape how we're perceived.
No, I'm stimulated by what you say. To mention a wonderful book, you might even want to take a look at it if you haven't. It's by the philosopher Amartya Sen, the economist philosopher.
Oh, yes.
And it's called Identity and Violence, The Illusion of Destiny. Okay. Yes. So to make a long story short, he makes this point. This is a deeply important point, I think, about the valency, the multidimensionality of our identities. Mm-hmm. We're not just one thing. We have sexual identities. We have political identities. We have regional and national identities. We may have racial identities, religious affiliations. We may have a certain artistic sensibility, a certain musical orientation, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Pastimes, habits, and so forth, and things that within this modern world where we can communicate. For example, I like to play chess. And I'd be playing like a couple of dozen games at a time with people on every continent on the planet, okay?
Yeah.
Because there's a site where we all convene and we play chess with each other. So we have these identities, and Sen is making the point that the real ethical challenge in the world of kind of identitarian ethics is not about I'm this thing and I have to be the best of this thing that I can be. It's about being able to weigh the relative significance of different dimensions of our identity.
Absolutely. I am
in situations, situations will call for, and sometimes our human identity.
Yes.
Our identity as Homo sapiens, as human beings,
yes,
transcends and should take precedence over, et cetera. So that's not the same thing as taking race off the table.
No, and that's I'm glad you clarified that, because I wouldn't want to put words in your mouth. So I'm sorry if I misunderstood you.
No, don't apologize.
No, absolutely. So
okay, so I got another question for you, because we have to limit our time.
Sure.
We're doing fine so far. I have another question, which is Alden and I have talked about the mayor, your former employer, Rahm Emanuel.
So I have to be, Oh,
you can't comment?
Yeah, I can't comment.
You can't comment on whether or not he should give a speech in which he extols the virtues of fatherhood in African-American families.
Unfortunately, I can't.
Okay, well, I don't want to press you on that. That's very interesting, because you were just saying the Glenn Show is a breath of fresh air because we talk about issues here that other people would dare not take up. But you have a employment, kind of fiduciary responsibility.
Yes.
I respect that. I respect that completely. Let's talk about something else.
Yeah. So it's not that I don't. It's not that I don't have opinions.
Well, let me ask you this. Forget about Chicago.
Yeah.
Aretha Franklin had a funeral.
Yes.
And at the end of it, a eulogizer, I can't remember this minister's name, an African-American preacher, got up and gave a eulogy. Did you hear that?
Yes.
Okay, I just want the audience to know that in the eulogy, he said things like, how is a woman without a husband going to raise a son so that he can be a man?
Mm-hmm.
And he said things like the Black community had to take responsibility to raise up his children and I think he would say more upright and Christian manner. I mean, I'm sorry, I think that's what he'd probably say.
Yeah.
In the face of all this going on. And people really lit into this brother. I wish I could remember his name. Anybody can look it up. Because they said, here he was standing over Aretha Franklin's casket doing a pound cake Bill Cosby speech on the Black community. How dare he? How dare he? How dare he?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? What did you think about that?
Yeah, I remember watching a clip of that, and I may have even watched his full eulogy. So a couple quick things. One, I this is just me. I didn't think it was appropriate for a funeral. I just didn't. I didn't think it was the time and the place for that. It was really about honoring Aretha Franklin. And the lives that she touched as a human being, her incredible talent, her gift as an artist, and the impact that she made in the world. I don't think it was the time or the place for a talk like that, and I really don't. So that's number one.
That's important.
Yeah, that's not, that also can impact how your message is even received, right? So I thought it was inappropriate. So that's number one. But number two, in terms of the content of speaking about like things that are happening, we've talked about this offline before in our communities that as Black folks often do not want to talk about. And I understand the sensitivity of it because number one, Black people have experienced discrimination, terrible discrimination, dehumanization, and we've been used to our culture and us as a people being seen as inherently deficient. So I understand the sensitivity behind, especially in front of cameras or in front of the public, talking about some of the social ills and the breakdown in our communities. Number one, it can be very painful. To call that out. It can be a painful look in the mirror, but that doesn't mean that we should not talk about it, especially amongst each other. If we can't have these conversations amongst each other, then who can we have them with? Now, that's not a commentary on the guy, the Reverend who gave the eulogy. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about us being able to take a look in the mirror and say, yes, white supremacy is real. Yes, racism exists. It was much, much worse before. We have made, without question, incredible progress in this country. There has to be a space where we can just say, look at the progress we've made in this country. But that doesn't mean that we don't need to take a good, hard look at our families, what's happening in our neighborhood communities, to take a pulse on our collective mentality and values and things like that. And I think that we should do that. I don't think that's about, quote unquote, blaming the victim, which is something I hear often. I think what that is honoring our individual and collective responsibility and sense of agency. Poverty and hardship and all of these things are not new to Black people. We've had a hard go in this country for a long time. And yet when I look at my parents and grandparents and great-grandparents' generations, I'm amazed by the things that they were able to do. And regardless of how white people treated them, regardless of the racial barriers that were erected, regardless of all of that, there was a sense of this is what is acceptable for us. This is how we're going to treat each other. We are going to honor our family. We're going to honor education. And so I really think it's important that we uphold those values and not be afraid to really take a deep dive and say, hey, look, we've made a lot of progress, but there are some things in our communities that are not serving us well. There are self-defeating behaviors. Our kids are dying in the streets. We're not respecting each other. And we can't turn a blind eye to those things. And I think that's Black love. That's not blaming the victim. That's not being an Uncle Tom. That is having enough self-respect and dignity to not outsource our power and agency to someone or something else. That's my view.
Amen. Hallelujah. Over here.
Yeah.
I hear you loud and clear. Let me ask you something now. You're a writer, and I have a soft spot in my heart for writers because my son, Glenn II, is a writer. Tell me about your writing and what are your aspirations? What are you doing?
Okay, so I have to let you know, I am not a quote unquote professional writer. I love to write. That's more of what it is. Ever since I was a little girl, I love to journal. I used to have a blog, and then I got busy with other things and I let the blog go. But it's something that I am doing again. And I'm really excited about this, is that I will be doing a podcast soon. I can't say too much because I don't want to get out in front of my collaborator, which is an organization, but I'm going to be doing a podcast, which I'm really excited about, and talking about a range of, social and political advocacy issues and culture and identity in the broader sense of the word. And so I'm really looking forward to having these conversations with interesting people and creative and talented who do different things. And so I'm excited about that, and the writing. Okay,
out there, you all heard it here first. Kelly Suzanne is going to do a podcast. She can't say too much more about it, but you should stay tuned. I'm sure it's going to be worth your time. Yes. Listen, I want to, in closing, just kind of call to mind our mutual friend, Kerwin Charles.
Yes.
You and I know somebody, and we both know him relatively well from different angles. Kerwin is an economist and is a professor at the University of Chicago at the Harris School of Public Policy. He's been acting dean, if I'm not mistaken, of that bad boy.
Yeah.
And he is of Guyanese extraction and American citizenship and whatnot. He's a wonderful, wonderful man.
Yeah.
So I almost just want to shout out through you to him.
Hi, Kerwin.
Yeah. I've been trying to get Kerwin to come on the Glenn Show, and he says, "No, man, this is not my forte." Maybe now he'll be inspired. Kerwin, wherever you are, man, we're looking for you.
Oh, Kerwin, you would be fantastic. You have so much to say. I mean, can I just say really briefly? I know that you're short on time.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that Kerwin Charles, bar none, is one of the best teachers I've ever had. Yes, he's a professor, but he really loves to teach. There are some professors at universities that like to focus on their research, but they don't necessarily like to teach. Some of them may even see their students or teaching as a distraction.
Yeah.
Not at all, Kerwin. Or any of the other professors except one that I had at the Harris School. They were all wonderful. But Kerwin is someone who just has this uncanny ability, to take complex subjects and things that could really confuse or intimidate people and really break them down into smaller bite-sized pieces so that people can understand and help the lights come on. And I was someone who was super intimidated by economics. I didn't, math is not really my thing. I have to work really, really hard at it to be average in it. But I learned so much from Kerwin. He's so committed to his students. He's an excellent lecturer. He's a great explainer of things. He breaks it down. And he's just such a wonderful human being. He's just a good person.
What a tribute. And it's all the more impressive for the fact that Kerwin's research is not short-stopping, okay? I just opened up my recent American Economic Review, and there was Kerwin Charles, a couple of colleagues. And I don't know if people out there understand this, getting a publication as an economist in the American Economic Review, that makes your career. And by the way, he's an African-American. I just don't want that to go unsaid.
He's a brother.
Kellyanne, thank you for coming on the Glenn Show. Wonderful, wonderful. We'll talk again one of these days, but thank you.
Thank you. This was a real honor. And of course, I look forward to watching